Welcome to One for the Money, the weekly talk show with interviews you can use. I'm national financial columnist and talk show host, Steve Savant. And on today's show, the psychology of money. Changing your core beliefs can change your life. Poor purchasing patterns caused by addictive behaviors can create self-defeating mindset when it comes to saving money for retirement. We need to understand our vulnerability to overspending. And to help us understand our irrational beliefs that can lead to addictive purchasing behaviors and change the way we think about money, sports psychologist and money behavioralist, Dr. Jack Singer, internet host of Psychologically Speaking, all here on One for the Money. Well, welcome, Dr. Jack Singer.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. I've had you on my other show, and we got so much out of it. And I want to talk about this because about 3 or 4 weeks ago, we did our debt reduction or debt awareness show, probably more awareness than reduction.
Yes.
And I cannot believe the kind of traffic we got from consumers who not only are in trouble, but they can't seem to change their behavior. Now, see, that surprises me. And when we talk about being vulnerable to overspending, I see this so much in consumer, and I'm wondering, psychologically, there's got to be a reason for this, and how can we remedy the situation?
Well, you know, Steve, people are creatures of habit. And even if the habit doesn't work for them, they tend to do it because the unknown is even more threatening. And one of the unfortunate habits that we find sometimes is that people get themselves caught up in ignoring their basic needs for security, financial security, and look at higher order needs like self-esteem. Like, I want to be impressive to people. I want people to think that I'm making a lot of money. And they're ignoring their basic needs to do that, which puts them into trouble.
Now, this keeping up with the Joneses, it's a syndrome, right?
Yes.
And I'm wondering, so many times I've seen people spend money to impress people they don't like.
Right. Yeah, they'll spend money to impress anybody because, again, it's based on their lack of self-esteem and the fact that they need to portray themselves in a way that they don't really feel portrays themselves inside.
Well, I'm thinking when a person really, if I could get the order switched out, whereas financial stability and security is so important, especially as we get older. How can I change and move that up the food chain of importance and priority and take my self-esteem issues? Because, you know, the marketers on television, all advertisement is marketing to your soul.
Right.
Telling you how inadequate you are without their product.
Right, exactly.
So when I'm thinking, I'm vulnerable to that just like any other human. How can I be able to begin to address these issues and move my financial security up the food chain of my priority?
Well, I think that people need to have conversations with their loved ones, you know, like their spouses, for example, and discuss what their fears are, what their concerns are financially, and listen to that other person's perhaps more objective opinion. We don't need to buy that car right now. We don't need to do this. We don't need to move it to do house redecoration or whatever, because that doesn't mean anything. What means something is having a nest egg that we can use for important issues down the road. And I think communications is the first thing that they need to do.
Well, I know with a lot of our senior market, we looked at an average of spending by the time you retired to the time you actually passed on. That period in time was a spending right around $234,000 average couple.
Wow.
That was high to me.
That's really high.
So when you say parking money for real important things, that's a big important thing, medical.
Absolutely.
So, but I'm looking at this, you know, think about this. Married couples, divorce, the number one issue for divorce is adultery and lack of intimacy. But right at number 2 is financial incompatibility.
Right.
Now, it's so hard to gain common ground.
Right.
In a marriage, two people are coming from 2 different points of view, completely different families.
Yeah, and again, that's why I say, Steve, that communication is very important, because if people don't talk about it, if they bury it, then it's like 2 separate entities working toward a goal that may be different for each one, and it leads to friction. So there needs to be a discussion. I think from the male standpoint, men need not to be afraid to admit vulnerability. I'm worried about financial future. Women need to not pounce on them. They need to say, I understand that this is an issue for you. Let me give you my take on it. And they need to come to some meeting of the minds on that.
Well, and now you just brought up something curious to me. So would you say the male concern of financial stability is greater than a female's concern? Because I always thought women were more concerned about stability and security.
Well, I think it's hard to judge because every family's different, but I think males are insecure but don't admit it. Females are not afraid to admit it. You know, it's interesting, in my own private practice, 75% of my clients are women, not because they have more problems. It's because they're not afraid to deal with them. The men are afraid to deal with them. So men may inside be insecure about their financial future, but they're not going to admit it to themselves or anyone else. And that's why men get heart attacks and have all kinds of medical issues and don't live as long as women. They keep things inside.
They're bottled up.
Right.
So how can I move from being a traditional male, bottled up, holding back my feelings and emotions, and sitting down and having a discussion that I think is going to be this is a major discussion to be had here. And so how can I move down that road? Because I'm probably the sticking point, probably not the wife.
Yeah, you are probably the sticking point as the male in the relationship. And the issue is, you know, do you have a CPA that you trust? Hopefully everybody does. Do you have other kinds of financial advisors that you trust? Do other members of your family have steered you in that direction? Sit down with those people and say, look, I'm in your hands because I don't know what to do about this, and I think what I've been doing so far isn't working. And listen to those people you trust and take some advice from them.
It's really good to try to form a team like you're suggesting.
Yeah.
A good CPA, maybe you haven't done your will or some kind of estate planning, to get your attorneys involved, and to build a financial team that can really help you move down these areas. And especially when you think about it, if you're really in trouble, as we talked about 3 or 4 weeks ago on debt, and we're trying to rein in our spending and start to put money in valuable places like our retirement, a sinking fund for medical, all these things that we're doing it for one reason. And that's why we're having Dr. Jack on this week, is because we're trying to help ourselves walk through some of the issues that have been stumbling blocks and obstacles to the way we think. And this is why I love to have money behavioralists in here to help us walk through it. I can tell you all the math. He's going to help you all the things in your head.
Did you know the average 401k runs out of money just 7 to 8 years into retirement? Time Magazine, the Wall Street Journal, and many other publications have warned of the difficulty of saving with a 401k. But what if there was a way to create tax-free lifetime retirement income with no stock market risk? Good news, there is.
You know, living in fear of the next market dive is not the way I want to live my life.
Why would I go out there and take on risk when I don't need to?
I have a lot less stress knowing I can't lose any more of my retirement savings in the stock market.
Call now to receive your free, no-obligation analysis of what this retirement vehicle could do for you, a comparison to your current retirement plan, and a free video that explains this exciting opportunity. Start planning a retirement you can enjoy instead of worrying about future tax increases and stock market losses. Creating income that will last your entire life is the most important thing you'll ever do. Take control of your future. Call now for your free analysis, comparison, and video.
Well, welcome back to our Two for the Show segment. And of course, we're with Dr. Jack Singer, and he's helping us with our finance. And maybe you've seen Dr. Jack on television before. He's been on ESPN Sports, Fox Sports, several other media outlets, talking to high-powered athletes about their problems. I would have thought these guys are making so much money. How can they be living how can some guys be living check to check with $1 million worth of contracts?
Because you know what, you can be a high-powered athlete, but that doesn't help you with the financial planning. And if you have the bad kind of advisor, or you think that this money's going to be fleeting, I need to spend it now, you can run into all kinds of problems.
Well, those are irrational beliefs, really.
Yes.
And this is what we want to talk about in this segment, because so many people say, well, this is my belief system, this is my value system. And really, some of this is irrational and it's unwarranted. So talk a little bit about this.
Yeah, everybody has this. They have a certain amount of irrational beliefs, but sometimes these beliefs really get in the way, Steve. For example, the belief that I have to go to great lengths to please other people or there's something wrong with me. It's sort of the disease to please.
Oh, I like
if
that.
I'm not pleasing other people, then something's wrong with me, or they won't like me, and I need everybody to like me. So this business of I have to like everybody and they have to like me undermines people's choices sometimes. That maybe somebody wants me to do something, and even though I don't think it's the right thing to do, I don't want to disappoint them. So one of the irrational core beliefs that a lot of people have is this disease to please other people. Another one is if anyone disapproves of me, then there's something wrong with me. In the core of me, there's something wrong with me. And that usually comes from people who in their childhood never really got the kind of gratification that they needed from mom or dad, and never really had the person say you're really okay, and they always spent their whole life as a child trying to do the right thing in order to get that kind of feedback. And so as an adult, it's like if anyone disapproves of me, that's a bad scene. I need everyone to approve of me. And of course you can see how that can lead to unfortunate things, including anxiety and issues like that. Another one is my worth as a person depends on how much I achieve and produce. So many people think that if I'm not achieving more and producing more, then that has something to do with my self-esteem, when actually self-esteem has to do with many, many things. What kind of a husband or father are you, or wife or daughter? It's not just what you're producing. But a lot of people believe that that's where my self-worth lies. And so there's this urge to amass more and more money and not thinking about what price you're paying while you do that. Your family, for example. You may not have it much to do with your family because you're a workaholic, things of that nature. And another one is I'm helpless and I don't have control over anything. When people feel that way, that leads to all kinds of unfortunate behavior, and of course it leads to depression, because feelings of helplessness and hopelessness are part of depression. But there's no such thing as I'm helpless and I have no control. We have control over what we think, we have control over what we plan to do with people. There are a lot of things we have control over. So those are some of the core beliefs that tend to be irrational that are very common across the board, Steve.
Well, I've seen wealthy Americans who have gained their wealth, but it costs them their health.
Absolutely.
So I've seen people who look at their self-worth only by calculating their net worth.
Absolutely.
So these attachments, how can I do want to be a good financier. I do want to have stability in my life on economy, but I don't want my net worth to define my self-worth.
Well, that's right. And there's an old phrase, do you want to be the wealthiest person in the cemetery? Because that's where you're winding up soon. It's true. People who worry about anything, whether it's finances or anything else, affect our immune system. And so when you affect your immune system, you do get sick. The immune system will shut down when you worry about things. And that goes back to when we lived in caves, and if your brain decided that there's danger, like a saber-toothed tiger hanging around outside the cave, your brain turns on the fight or flight nervous system, which shuts off your immune system temporarily till you flee or get away from the danger. Well, people who worry maybe 50 times a day, every time they do that, the brain thinks there's danger and it shuts off the immune system. So if you're not really feeding that immune system, you're making yourself much more vulnerable to disease.
What I got out of that, if I'm going on DEFCON level alert and there's no reason for it,
Right.
I'm really hurting myself physiologically.
You are. There's no question. And you go on DEFCON alert without knowing you're doing it, because again, the default position in the human subconscious mind is he's worried about something. We don't know if it's life-threatening or not, but we're not taking any chances. So it turns it on.
Well, how can I shut this down? Because you said we're not really altogether helpless when it comes to our feelings, the kind of emotions that we're experiencing. How can I get a hold of that and conquer that?
You get a hold of that by simply thinking things through rationally. Like if you say to yourself, I'm afraid that someone's going to be unhappy with me unless I purchase this car. You need to ask yourself, do you have any evidence to support that? And if that person in fact would be unhappy with you for purchasing that car, what does that tell you about your relationship with that person? So there are ways to rationally think this through instead of sticking with your old unfortunate habits.
Do you think we're spending on the disapproval of others?
Oh yeah, there's no question. That, I remember once when I was first getting started in private practice, my CPA said, you need to buy a Cadillac because you need to have an image that people will see so they'll think you're a good psychologist. I thought that was so ridiculous. That's what he said.
That's a mentality of fake it till you make it. I mean, we're always spending to try to push an image up, and I'm wondering, why do we want to project it? And when we come back in the third segment, we're going to talk about some of this projection of image and some of the things that get us in trouble. And again, irrational behavior. We're talking about people who disapprove of what we're talking about. And can we harness feelings when we have one? People have legitimate feelings. When we come back, we'll talk about a lot of this all here on One for the Money.
Did you know the average 401k runs out of money just 7 to 8 years into retirement? Time Magazine, the Wall Street Journal, and many other publications have warned of the difficulty of saving with a 401k. But what if there was a way to create tax-free lifetime retirement income with no stock market risk? Good news, there is.
Living in fear of the next market dive is not the way I want to live my life.
Why would I go out there and take on a risk when I don't need to?
I have a lot less stress knowing I can't lose any more of my retirement savings in the stock market.
Call now to receive your free, no-obligation analysis of what this retirement vehicle could do for you, a comparison to your current retirement plan, and a free video that explains this exciting opportunity. Start planning a retirement you can enjoy instead of worrying about future tax increases and stock market losses. Creating income that will last your entire life is the most important thing you'll ever do. Take control of your future. Call now for your free analysis, comparison, and video.
Well, welcome back to our 3 to Get Ready segment. And of course, we're with Dr. Jack Singer, money behavioralist, sports psychologist, and you're on the couch with Dr. Jack. I mean, I feel like I'm going through a whole kind of metamorphosis of my thinking, irrational thinking, of the approval of others, all these things you brought up in the second segment. But you know what? That leads to this part here. And this is what disturbs me, because we know that there's a tremendous amount of addictive behavior, codependent relationships that really aren't really healthy. Talk a little bit about how do we get addicted to this, because the outward manifestation of addiction is our overspending.
Right. Yeah, a lot of people have all kinds of addictions, where they obsessively do something over and over again, even though it's not in their best interest. And they do it because they're afraid to stop.
Are they conscious of that, though?
Not always. No, not always. People get into addictions and they're in such denial that anyone on the outside can see it, but they don't admit it. It can be drinking, it can be drugs, it can be gambling, or what have you. But when we talk about a more subtle kind of addiction, Steve, like excessive spending, people say, well, that's not an addiction, but it is. It can be an addiction. It's an attempt to try to buy happiness, to buy things that make you feel good, because the rest of your life has something disruptive in it where you don't feel good. And so you want to keep doing it, because it's like eating. Eating is one of the hardest things to stop doing, because we have to eat, and it's an immediate satisfier. So people, for example, who are addicted to sweets, they eat it and they feel good immediately. Well, that's an addiction. It's hard to stop doing that. It's one of the only reinforcers that we can get immediately as soon as we put it in our mouth. And spending does that too. People tend to spend and they get something they feel good about and they're proud of it, and they show it off. They're a car or a new TV or whatever the case may be. And if people reward them verbally and say, oh, that's wonderful, and they're saying things like, you must have had a good month, well, I want to get more of that feedback. So the basis of this is that people are missing feedback. They're missing good feelings about themselves, and they're getting addicted to an unhealthy habit.
Well, I see a lot of shows on cable right now that talk about addictive interventions.
Yeah.
Could you actually go through a money intervention?
Sure you could. An intervention, of course, is when you get family members and people who really care about this person to actually sit the person down, usually against their will. They don't want to do this, they're embarrassed and everything else, or they don't think they need it. And you sit down and you say, here's what's going on and you're hurting us, and crying happens and people talk about their feelings. And the hope is that the perpetrator will recognize what he or she is really doing. And you can do this about money. I mean, how many times have I seen over the years women come in to see me and tell me that they're just on the verge of bankruptcy because their husband is a gambler, or vice versa. The wife could be a shopaholic. There are some illnesses that lead to this, for example. Yeah, maybe you didn't know that, but bipolar disorder, which used to be called manic depressive disorder, now it's bipolar disorder. One of the classic characteristics of it is unbelievable spending on things you don't even need. Cases of toilet paper, things you don't need. You're just hoarding them because that spending makes you feel better about the depression that you're feeling at the time. So that's one of the classic signs. So sometimes it's a case of a mental illness that may be brewing when people do overspending.
Well, when I think about addictions, and I'm like you, I think about, well, alcohol I understand, gambling I understand, drug addiction, pharmaceutical or illegal, I get all that.
Right.
But I'm trying to see, people are trying to break their spending habits, but they haven't really spoken to the underlying root cause. So all we're doing is trimming the grass, never getting to the root cause. Talk a little bit about how do we talk about the actual jugular vein of this issue so that we can change?
Yeah, when I talk to people who have addictions, I use hypnosis sometimes to try to get at some of those jugular veins of what's going on. But what we talk about is, what is the trigger for this addiction? Try to think about what triggers you to do this behavior that really isn't working for you. And by the way, a simple definition of an addiction is any behavior that you're unwilling or unable to stop and it gets in the way of something major in your life, like your job or your home life or something like that. So even if it's one drink, if that gets in the way of your job or your home life and you're unwilling to change it, unable to change it, then that's an addiction by definition. So it doesn't matter how much of it you do, it matters how disruptive it is in your life and whether you're willing to change it.
Well, could a person actually be a functional addiction?
Oh, absolutely.
And still, he doesn't have any issues. He's still going to work.
Yeah.
He's still performing. He's
absolutely.
still doing the things at home. He's domestically okay.
Right. Then he's a functional addict, and sooner or later something's going to fall apart because addictions feed on themselves and they get bigger and bigger. They don't stay where they are. You need more of this to feel good after a while. So yes, I think you can be a functional addict. So the main thing for people to understand is that you really need to find out what triggers your addiction, whether it's spending money or whatever. And once you can come to grips with that and be honest with yourself on what triggers that addiction, then you're in the good position to start changing the thoughts that led to that.
And how do I look for the trigger? How do I identify that?
Well, when you have the urge to engage in this addiction, what is that urge about? Like if somebody said, I feel like buying one of those new TVs, a 3D TV just came out, I want to buy a 3D TV. Okay, what is the problem here? Why do you want to buy that 3D TV? What is it you feel you're missing if you don't do that?
I often wonder with the new technology out, can I see the optical upgrade by going to 3D or going to the new higher resolution? Right. Is my acuity that great that I need to spend and put that money down? I'm always curious, do I really hear the audio difference on a big stereo purchase? Do I have that kind of training? Right. We come back, we're going to set you all up. We've talked about preparation, but now we're going to tell you how to go forward.
Did you know the average 401k runs out of money just 7 to 8 years into retirement? Time Magazine, the Wall Street Journal, and many other publications have warned of the difficulty of saving with a 401k. But what if there was a way to create tax-free lifetime retirement income with no stock market risk? Good news, there is.
Living in fear of the next market dive is not the way I want to live my life.
Why would I go out there and take on risk when I don't need to?
I have a lot less stress knowing I can't lose any more of my retirement savings in the stock market.
Call now to receive your free, no-obligation analysis of what this retirement vehicle could do for you, a comparison to your current retirement plan, and a free video that explains this exciting opportunity. Start planning a retirement you can enjoy instead of worrying about future tax increases and stock market losses. Creating income that will last your entire life is the most important thing you'll ever do. Take control of your future. Call now for your free analysis, comparison, and video.
Well, welcome back to our fourth segment, 4 to Go. Really, it's our action plan. We're talking with, of course, Dr. Jack Singer, and not only sports psychologist and money behavioralist, but I think have couch will travel. Exactly. I have to say, exactly. I love that. Let's talk a little bit about your action plan, because people are saying, okay, I kind of got what you said. I'm ready to confess my addictions. I'm willing to have some intervention here. What are the plan? Give me a step-by-step, walk me through it.
Well, there are many ways that people distort their thinking, Steve. One way is catastrophizing. That means that they look at something as if it's going to be a disaster down the road when there's no evidence to suggest that. Another way they distort their thinking is what we call mind reading. They read the minds of someone. This person's not going to like me unless I do this. So once we understand the kinds of ways that you can distort your thinking, you can quickly recognize when you're doing this, and that changes your core beliefs. So, for example, if somebody said, if I don't go to great lengths to please other people, then they'll abandon and reject me. Well, if someone was telling me that, I would say, do you have any proof of this, that people will abandon you or reject you if you don't go to great lengths to please them? They say, no, but I pretty much feel that that's the way it would be. Well, if you don't have any proof of it, then you're just making this up in your mind, and that's a form of mind reading. So let's think about a different way you can look at this. And so then the person would say, well, maybe I don't have to please everybody, and I'm not going to have a bunch of enemies. Maybe I can try that. So that's a way to start different thinking. Another one would be, when people disapprove of me, it invariably means that I must be bad or wrong. And I would suggest that sounds like what we call an overgeneralization. Why would that mean you have to be bad or wrong if somebody disapproves of you? Somebody could disapprove of you because they have a different philosophy. They could be a different religion. They could have different values than you. Doesn't mean better. It's just different. So why would you have to assume you're bad or wrong? Or if somebody says, my worth as a person depends on how much I achieve and produce. Well, where is that coming from? What is your worth really based on? What do you mean how much you achieve and produce? How about your worth as a father or a mother or a daughter or a son or a sister or a brother, or the value that you bring to other people in your volunteer work? Where does that come in? So the essence of all of this is, once people understand that their thinking is distorted and how it's distorted, they can then move to the real action plan, which is stop myself when I have that kind of thought and change it to a more rational thought.
Now I'm thinking, our society really is a performance-based society.
Yeah.
And your employer is not going to be too happy if you're not self-motivated and wanting to put some serious production online.
Right.
And he's going to view your bonus based on all that. How can I still do a really good job for my employer on one hand and yet not fall into the trap that we're talking about?
Well, that's a really good point, because you sometimes have to separate your work life from the rest of your life. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't. They don't turn it off when they leave work, and they come home and they think they have to be productive. And, you know, that comes into what we call type A personalities, where people are workaholics whether they're at work or not, and they have to keep doing it. It's like they're a hamster on one of those runways that they're running on. And so what you have to do is, yes, you have to do what you know is rational. For example, my employer expects this quota for me to perform. I know I have to do that. But that doesn't mean that when I'm home, I have to have the best yard, or there's something wrong with me, or I have to have the best car in the neighborhood, or people will look down on me. So you have to know how to differentiate what do I really need to do for survival, and beyond that, what can I do to make my life better?
I want to go back to one of the points you brought up, because I find this interesting. The issue of rejection, the issue of abandonment, and then all of a sudden we start spending to make up for that. What if a person actually experienced those things, though? I mean, really childhood trauma of being rejected or orphaned or something along those lines. Right. How can I correct that? Because that's a major root issue.
It is, but I talk to people about what's the past is the past and what's the present is the present. And because you may have actually been abandoned before, has nothing to do with your fear of being abandoned again. That was when you were a child by certain people, has nothing to do with now. People need to let go of the past. We're not prisoners of the past. Everything we do is from this point forward. And if you allow the past to keep poisoning your thinking, then you'll be stuck in the past.
So if I can get away from that, I could change my entire way of money. The way I approach money, how I spend it, how I save it, how I use it. This is where we're trying to go to this point today in our segment here, is just saying, here are our next steps. We want to be able to go down this road. So when I'm looking at this, I'm looking at the ability to put aside these false, irrational belief systems that I've been carrying on and move forward. How do I shut the door to the past and open the future?
Right.
How do I do that?
And people need to stop themselves. You know, one time we did a show where we talked about a rubber band, and that's kind of what I tell people to do. You put a rubber band on your wrist, the kind that come in the mail, the fat rubber bands that aren't too tight, and every time you catch yourself with one of your old habitual thoughts that are self-defeating, like, I have to keep working harder or people won't like me, you snap the rubber band and stop that thought dead in its tracks, take a couple of deep breaths so you can relax yourself, and then give yourself a more rational thought. Like, I don't have any evidence to support this, and I owe it to my family to stop working and do things with my family at this point. So you stop the negative thinking, you relax yourself with some breathing techniques, and then you change it to a positive thought.
Well, Dr. Jack, I so appreciate you being on our show. We really want to come to a place where we can leave the past behind and look into our future. I love Money Behavioralist. I think it's a niche market that you're in, Dr. Jack. I know our listeners appreciate it. I appreciate your time. And remember, you can go out to our website and get all this information right on One for the Money. Remember, we have the disciplined tools you need to help you with your money-saving experience. And we've partnered with financial professionals who know the value of money and its impact on retirement. For more information on how you can change your mindset and save more for retirement, just go out to our show's website at www.oneforthemoney.tv. And remember, you can follow me on Twitter and visit me on all my social media network sites: Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Google+.